Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode 201 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I'm Anthony Ewing, CEO, co-founder here at Thoughtium, and your host for today's episode. We just celebrated our 200th episode. Thank you, everybody who joined in that celebration. We got a lot of really great comments after episode 200 and some real encouragement to keep at it. And that's exactly what we are doing here, starting with episode 201. Today, we have a really exciting guest that I'm really looking forward to diving into some discussion. Her name is Cynthia Cole. She's a partner at Baker McKinsey. And the topic for today is really going to be around the power of patience. How do we balance ambition with trusting the process? We know that all of us as high achievers, as leaders in organizations, we have big ambitions, and we've seen those ambitions wax and wane over the years, and also impacted by, what happens outside of our walls, our families, our community. And Cynthia has a bit of a journey herself that she's gone on in both self-exploration, career development, and some of those really critical pivots that we all have in our career, some that are welcome and some that just come no matter what. And so we are really, really excited to welcome Cynthia Cole to the table. Cynthia, welcome to the roundtable.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So want to just get to know you a little bit. So tell us, if you had to, describe your leadership in a couple of sentences, how would you describe your leadership?
I would say that I'm authentic.
Mm-hmm.
So would be the first thing. I think that I am also someone who tries to be very natural. I really think it's important to kind of to have like an open door policy, to be very sort of spontaneous, right? I think accountability is important in leadership. I find oftentimes people either give themselves like a self-appointed title or a role, right? But there is no accountability behind it. And so that to me is very important as a leader. I mean, I think I ask of my team to, turn in things on time and talk to me and be honest with me about what we're doing. If someone makes a mistake, I really want to see ownership of the mistake so that we can correct it, right? Especially in my business, we have to give something to a client. And if we've made an error or if there's something that isn't right, I will absolutely, take the bullet for the mistake, but I need to know that we made a mistake, right? Or we made a miscalculation. And so again, I think I think that starts with me, right? Is being able to also have that exchange with people on my team and being able to say, look, you know what, I was wrong about this, or I took the wrong approach, or, and so it's being able to kind of have that environment of sharing, right? Which is, again, I think goes back to the sort of authentic leadership style.
Yeah. Authenticity and accountability are what I'm hearing ring true. And I feel like in this day and age, for, as quickly as things are moving, and particularly as fast as organizations are changing, whether that's in corporate America or in your case in the law field, that authenticity is so important. And as well, I'm also hearing the accountability piece. I love what you said about, taking the bullet or kind of walking the walk, if you will. So important in today's, realm of leadership. Those kind of player coaches that are able to stand along their teams, demonstrate what good looks like, support from alongside. And those are just all incredible ingredients of a great leader. So appreciate you sharing. Give us a little bit of a background on kind of what you do and what you're excited about, and maybe by way of like the journey that took you to where you are today, because I know, today's topic is really all about balancing ambition with also trusting the process. And I'd love to just hear maybe a Cliff Notes version of your journey, and then I want to dive into maybe some of those pivot points where you really did have to trust the process.
Sure. And those were numerous, frankly, right? And I think I've gotten better at that, right? As I've aged. I mean, because age, happens to the best of us. Or aging does. So, I mean, just roughly, graduated from Northwestern Law School and started as a corporate M&A associate actually in San Francisco, at a time that was a real boom, right? Sort of 2000, and things were, it was sort of everything was happening at the same time. And then there was a major bust, right? On a lot of different levels for the economy, the stock market, law firms, tech. Obviously, 9/11, it was a kind of a difficult time really to start, right? Practicing. And so that was that. When in-house, I always wanted to be a general counsel. When I graduated from law school, that was sort of my goal was, what would be I had a path roughly that I thought would get me there. And so went in-house and eventually did become a general counsel, worked in France for a while. But there, like you said, there were a number of, and then went back into private practice, which most people frankly never do, because most people are looking for the exit. Oftentimes, I hope the people on my team are not, but if they are, I want to be supportive of that too. But oftentimes people go into law firms and then they really want to go in-house, right? And so most people don't go back. But one of the sort of times that I really did have to dig deep, right? Let's say into sort of trusting the process was, I had been a general counsel. I had been working in France for 8 years, and came back to Silicon Valley at very beginning of 2014, and was looking for a job in-house and interviewing with a number of companies. And frankly, the response was kind of lukewarm, right? And I thought, and a lot of it was because I had been outside of Silicon Valley for about 10 years. And so, the response was, well, you just don't understand how things work around here. Things have changed since you were here last. And I was like, really? Is it that different than everywhere else? That my skills don't translate. So I had to, and that was difficult. And it took me, it took me a really long time to find a job, frankly, right? I was also getting my family settled back in the US, which was a big undertaking. My children were in first and third grade, right, at the time. And so there was a lot of that. And I ended up, but I had to feed my family. I couldn't just not work, right? So I ended up taking a position as a contractor at Cisco. And, so I went from being general counsel of a $250 million, right, PE-backed multinational company, to being a contractor at Cisco. And I'm, and that was a humbling moment. I'm a relatively humble person, so it wasn't, but still, it was a moment, right?
Yeah.
And I was fortunate to the people that I worked with at Cisco, the man who hired me, who is still a good friend right now, helped make that transition for me very supportive. And right. So that was really important, which is something that I think is also very important in sort of how I interact, which is relationships, right? And looking for other authentic people and really, sort of staying with them, right? Through the process. But, that didn't feel good, right? To go to have to do that. And then within a couple of months, I had a permanent offer to stay at Cisco, which I didn't take, and I had an offer to go be a general counsel again at a software-defined networking company startup, and so that's where I ended up moving. And so, I think, but it was, I think there was a lot that was sort of going on in my mind, which was, as someone who, obviously I'm someone who works very hard. And I think so much of ambition, honestly, sometimes is trying to exercise control, right? Over over an outcome or whatever path that you
Yeah.
have chosen to stay on, right? You don't want to relinquish control. Um, and I had no control,
Yeah.
right? I wasn't able to effectuate what I thought made sense for what I wanted, and sort of continue on a path that I
Yeah.
had just really started, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I had to give that up. I mean, I had to just say
Yeah.
to myself, okay, look, I have to do this, and I'm just going to trust that this will work out, right, in the right way. And it did. And so, but it wasn't easy,
Yeah.
right?
I'm curious those moments that, first of all, what a journey, right? What a ride. I think we can all relate to just the winding and turning of how your career might unravel. I
Yeah.
started my career right out of college working for Pfizer, Fortune 100 organization, and this was back in the time when you would spend 30 or 40 years with an organization, get a pension, and retire.
Yeah.
And this was maybe what I was maybe expecting. Man, I could have been further from the truth. And what I'm relating to in your story is this concept of us, especially as high achievers and performers, wanting control. And I'm curious, when, along your journey, has that kind of firm grip of control maybe played against you?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, often. And the more honest I am with myself, and again, I really think, again, as I get older and I have more experience, and I also have I have the vantage point of sort of being a leader of a team and a group, and I can see
Mhm.
how others behave as well. And so I can recognize, it's easier also to sometimes recognize things in others. And then if you can take it back to
Yeah,
yourself, you can say,
yeah,
wait a second, I've done that too, right? Or
yeah.
I'm doing that right now. So gosh, I wonder what that looks like to others, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, I think so much of it is frankly fear based, right? And so
Yeah,
I think when I can tap into, when I can acknowledge for myself that the decision that I'm making or the reaction that I'm having to a particular event, right, or something in front of me is a reaction coming from fear,
yeah,
then I know that that's probably the wrong reaction, right? And that has taken me, frankly, a long time to sort of understand about myself, right?
mhm.
When I get angry or I'm reactive, right? And so what I have found is that being able to sort of pause,
Yeah,
and and take a step back, maybe ask someone else, right, who's really
mm,
close, and say, wait a minute, do you see this the same way that I do?
yeah,
Or is this just me reacting from like a
yeah,
fear-based
yeah,
space?
yeah.
And I just think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, fear is so close to that, or what might lie underneath this term of control, right? In so many ways, both personally and professionally. And fear is also so elusive. Like, it's so hard in that moment when you've got this tight grip to very quickly identify, oh my gosh, I'm afraid of something, and this is what it is. And so I love the fact that, like, one of your anecdotes to that is you call on others. You say, hey, what are you seeing here? Which I think is so important. And again, as leaders, oftentimes we feel like we need to, and maybe even want to, make those decisions ourselves. I was
Yeah.
the term cognitive dissonance came up in something that I was reading earlier this week, and I'd always heard the term, never really kind of read into it, but was so intrigued around those moments when your brain is telling you something and your body is telling you something different.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I'm curious, like, have you ever been in those moments where your head, your mind, even that kind of the part of your cortex where, like, you're calling on past decisions, you feel like which direction you want to go, but it's like your instincts and your body and your being is saying, no, it's going somewhere else. And how do we handle those situations?
So yeah, wow. I mean, I think oftentimes and those, I can't necessarily share all of them on this today, but a lot of times those are in personal, those are like in personal situations,
Yeah,
right? Where I'm
definitely.
around certain people where I hear what they're saying and I have an intellectual reaction, but then I also really have a reaction in my body that I'm like, something is off, right? And
Yeah.
I don't actually feel comfortable. And I think part of that is, I mean, we talk a lot about culture, right? And creating a culture. And I think that is something that's important to me, right? And
Yeah.
it is to create a space where people don't have that cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard, and I guess I will say, when I kind of speak acting out of a sort of, maybe the inverse of what you were saying is when I went from being, general counsel, and I was interim CEO, because the CEO that I was working for passed away suddenly of a heart attack
Mm,
at 55 years old. And
mm.
so, I then, from that point, sort of had the idea to go back into private practice. Um, and that was very much that decision was actually, I would say, less intellectually motivated and more sort of instinct
Yeah.
motivated.
Instinct. Yeah.
And a lot of people who had known me for a very long time and knew me when I was at a firm before and knew that I had said I would never go back, right? And so they were saying to me, okay, are you sure that you're like of sound mind? Because what is this? Like, what are you going to do there? Um, and I actually even had some friends who were lawyers, partners in other firms, say to me, what could you do in a firm? Like, what kind of value can you
Mm.
bring? And I, at the time, wasn't entirely, I mean, I had some idea of what I thought I could build, but I wasn't entirely sure. And the firm who hired me at that time, took a chance, right, on me being able to build a sort of viable practice. Um, and I'm grateful for that, right? That was a great
Hmm.
opportunity. Um, and they also gave me the space, frankly, to work it out, right? I mean, they gave me the space
Yeah.
to sort of follow my instinct and build the relationships that I knew I had. But it really wasn't, it's not like I had like a full blown, I mean, I had a business plan, but
Yeah.
that business plan shifted and it changed,
Yeah.
and I was able to sort of accentuate it. And I think a lot of that was a time in my life where I was much more focused on doing what my instinct told me to do,
Mm.
right? Even though maybe it didn't make sense, or other people didn't think it made sense. And I think
Yeah.
that, frankly, has led me to, and I was afraid, for sure. I was absolutely, I thought this could be a total bust. Um, but I also felt like it was something that I was really motivated to do. And so I think that was, frankly, what really put me on a journey that is more aligned with sort of who I am, and
Yeah.
being able to be responsive
Yep.
and flexible, and sort of acting from a place of more instinct, right? I
Yeah.
guess. So
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm thinking about, I think even as leaders, again, the idea of kind of the mind body connection, we're starting to make more and more connections, if you will, to that in our kind of personal development, in the personal development world. But I do think we could be doing a lot more of that as leaders within organizations. For example, I know that there are times when, for example, I'm giving feedback to somebody, and I'm doing it based on maybe what I've learned, like frameworks that are in my mind, frameworks that have been tested and tried and true, maybe frameworks that I aspire to use more naturally. But as I'm kind of like providing the feedback in that way, my body's saying like, this is not authentic to who you are. And we've all had those moments, right? It's a little surreal or out of body where you're kind of like watching yourself from the sideline saying, yeah, the connection's just not there. So I love, your kind of steadfast focus on authenticity and how that maybe has guided your path along the way. Tell us now, like where you're at in your career. What are the one or two things that, as you look forward, you're most focused on, or like what's like the one or two priorities for you from a career perspective moving forward? Now that you've followed this path and you've learned how to kind of switch from the mind to more of the instinct, what's most important to you now?
Oh, wow. It's making an impact.
Yeah.
And I mean it, and that, can take different forms, right? I mean, that's sort of
Mhm.
with respect to clients and providing the sort of advice in the space that I think is the most relevant for them, and providing it in a way that is the most usable, right, for them,
Yeah.
meaning that they can take it and really run with it and use it and be as proactive in their own practice, right?
Yep.
And then that's also with respect to my team. It's really important. I mean, I mentioned, I've had obviously people on my team who have left, and gone on and done other things. And I've helped them land another position, right?
Yeah.
Because again, I don't believe in, I think that's, everyone has a different path, and your path may not be with me at this juncture, right? But you're still a great person, and I want to encourage you in what you're doing, right? And so,
Mhm.
and then also making an impact in other ways for my clients and my friends. I mean, I'm also co-chair of Baker Women California, which is the women's affinity group. I make active decisions, intentional decisions about sort of where I present and speak, and making sure, who I'm inviting to be on those panels with me, right? Trying to promote,
Yeah.
different people and different activities. And so I just think this, to me, this job, I mean, I love my job, which, and I would say I am more fulfilled sort of in my day-to-day job than I ever have been,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Even, almost 25 years now down
Yeah.
the road,
Yeah.
which again, I'm incredibly grateful for.
Yeah.
Um, but this job, without being able to also make an impact, right? And sort of, with respect to messaging and
Yep.
basically assisting and serving, right, is
Yeah.
really important to me. And for me, you
Yeah.
can't disassociate the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's great though, because I think that, the ability to provide impact on a day-to-day basis is earned, over time. And as we get to different, not just levels in organizations, but like different seasons in our lives,
right.
we feel more empowered to provide more impact on a day-to-day basis. And I love that answer for you. That impact is the number one focus. Something that we might have said earlier on in our career, but something that we're truly living today, which I
Yeah.
just think is incredible. So we like to round our discussions out with a quick lightning round. If you're up for it, I'm going to ask you just two or
Okay.
three questions, and
Okay.
your job is to just provide like the first fastest answer that comes to mind. Are you game?
All right. Okay.
Cool. We'll start with Cynthia. What are you reading, watching, or listening to these days that you're really geeking out about?
Oh my gosh. To be honest, I don't read as much as so hold on. What am I?
Could be a show,
Um,
could be a podcast, could be music, could be
so
um,
music. So let's go with music then.
like,
Cowboy Junkies.
okay. I have not heard of Cowboy Junkies. Should I know
Well,
them?
yes, you should. I think you should. I think you would actually, I mean, I've only just met you, but I think you would like them. So check them
What's
out.
what
Yes.
genre are they?
They're sort of, I don't even, is it like, it's not folk, but it's a little bit
More vocal?
modern
Yeah.
folk, I guess. I
Okay.
probably am wrong, and someone's
Cool.
gonna shoot me for it. But yeah, check them
Yeah.
out.
Okay. I'll have to check that out for sure. Um, maybe I'll end on one that we just love to ask everybody. I want you to think about a word that describes, your superpower, a single word that describes your greatness. What's the greatest, aspect of you, who you are in this world. Okay. Do you have it?
I do.
Okay. And I want you to finish the sentence. If the world were a lot more like Cynthia, it would be blank.
It would be visionary.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I can tell that you are a visionary individual. I can tell that you've got the leadership skills that have grown organically over the course of a pretty awesome career. And we so appreciate you sharing a little bit on your journey and some of the good stuff at those pivot points that we all can remind ourselves. Particularly this idea of taking radical ownership and the idea of making sure that your mind and your heart are connected. So, Cynthia, thank you so much for contributing to the Thought Team Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. It was a true pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll see you soon. All right, that wraps up our episode 201 of the Thought Team Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. What a great conversation. I always love talking to leaders who have such a sense of awareness of their path and are not afraid to share kind of the messy middle of what happens when we make life and career big decisions. So that is what this conversation is all about: is bringing leaders and leadership topics to you all that matter most on a week-to-week basis. And we look forward to seeing you next week. You can find all of our episodes at thoughtteam.com/live. That's thoughtteam.com/live. We will see you all next